Good morning from Sacred Space at Titania's Realm. The time is 9:44 a.m. on the 4th of July 2025. It's 12 months since I started CPAP therapy today. 1 year. So I am slowly improving. I had a good night last night. 0.8 events per hour instead of shot up to, I think it was 2.4. So a good night is a good night. I still feel quite tired though because I had to get up to pee 3 times, and that's the part that's debilitating, is the constant interruption to the sleep. But I feel tired, but I feel, relatively clear-headed and reasonably well, and been sitting here in the studio with my boy birds and Facebooking and sharing my memories and sharing my more potent writings that come up from my archives of Facebook. And just thought, while I'm synapsing and feeling good, I'll read a story for my wonderful YouTube audience and subscribers who enjoy the sound of my voice and the stories that I present to you. And it's a beautiful day here in Brisbane, Australia, but it's very cold, 13 degrees. And it's lots of beautiful golden lights streaming through the garden. So, my chair just dropped me down a bit more. Lift myself up a bit. Hang on a second. I might drop down again. Short person thing. You're always falling down and getting up. Right. This is the second video I made. I actually had already started. I was 11 minutes in, but I had Bo out, and little Kermie was quite aggressive with him this morning, so I thought I'll put him back in his cage. His door's open, but he's too stupid to come out on his own, so he's safe inside his cage even though his door's open. And it was a bit hard to catch him. I have to throw a towel over him to catch him because they're a bit wild. All the wild things find their way to my house eventually, but I don't really mind at all. We like the wild things. Mama T, and my Ojibwa nickname is Mustang Quay. Even though I'm not Ojibwa, it was bestowed upon me by my Ojibwa friend. Mustang Quay, he said, wild horsewoman. You push your way through every obstacle, through every challenge, through every wondrous surprise that comes your way. Push through life. And that's my spirit. But anyway, Mustang Quay is pushing herself through again another day. And it's miraculous. And it's a bit beautiful, and sometimes it's a bit astonishing at times. Even astonishes me. Right, anyway, we're going to continue on reading from W. Somerset Maugham. And together we're going to enjoy this splendid day. So here we go. Today's story is titled, I'm just going to get the sun out of my eyes a bit. That's better. The Promise. My wife is a very unpunctual woman, so when, having arranged to lunch with her at Claridge's, I arrived there 10 minutes late and did not find her, I was not surprised. I ordered a cocktail. It was the height of the season, and there were but 2 or 3 vacant tables in the lounge. Some of the people, after an early meal, were drinking their coffee. Others, like myself, were toying with a dry martini. The women in their summer frocks looked gay and charming, and the men debonair. But I could see no one whose appearance sufficiently interested me to occupy a quarter of an hour. I was expecting to wait. They were slim and pleasant to look upon, well dressed and carelessly at ease, but they were for the most part of a pattern, and I observed them with tolerance rather than with curiosity. But it was 2 o'clock, and I felt hungry. My wife tells me that she can neither wear a turquoise nor a watch, for the turquoise turns green and the watch stops, and this she attributes to the malignity of fate. I have nothing to say about the turquoise, but I sometimes think the watch might go if she wound it up. I was engaged with these reflections when an attendant came up, and with that hushed significance that hotel attendants affect, as though their message held a more sinister meaning than their words suggested, told me that a lady who had just telephoned to say that she had been detained and could not lunch with me. I hesitated. It is not very amusing to sit in a crowded restaurant by oneself, but it was late to go to a club, and I decided that I had better stay where I was. I strolled into the dining room. It has never given me any particular satisfaction, as it appears to do to so many elegant persons, to be known by name to the head waiters of fashionable restaurants, but on this occasion I should certainly have been glad to be greeted by less stony an eye. What's all this stuff been going on behind me? Are you being good, my boys? Yes, they've been perfectly good for the mama tea. Now that they're separated. Oh my God, a bit touch and go this morning. He was quite savage. Well, now I know. Can't trust him. Can't trust him with the bye. I don't know what that noise was. It was Bo grinding his beak, sharpening his beak, because he needs it with the self-defense, poor little mite. Anyway, I strolled into the dining room. Oh no, we've read that. We were up to Stony and I. Sorry, people of Earth. It's a bit like that in Psychedelic Dreamers, Mama T's, the Tanya's world. I can float in and out of ordinary reality. It is what it is. The maitre d'hotel with a set and hostile face told me that every table was occupied. I looked helplessly round the large and stately room, and on a sudden, to my pleasure, caught sight of someone I knew. Lady Elizabeth of Vermont was an old friend. She smiled, and noticing that she was alone, I went up to her. Will you take pity on a hungry man and let me sit with you? I asked. Oh, do, but I've nearly finished. She was at a little table by the side of a massive column, and when I took my place, I found that, notwithstanding the crowd, we sat almost in privacy. This is a bit of luck for me, I said. I was on the point of fainting from hunger. She had a very agreeable smile. It did not light up her face suddenly, but seemed rather to suffuse it by degrees with charm. It hesitated for a moment about her lips, and then slowly travelled to those great shining eyes of hers, and there softly lingered. No one surely could say that Elizabeth Vermont was cast in the common mould. I never knew her when she was a girl, but many have told me that then she was so lovely it brought the tears to one's eyes, and I could well believe it, for now, though 50, she was still incomparable. Her ravaged beauty made the fresh and blooming comeliness of youth a trifle insipid. I do not like these painted faces that look all alike, and I think women are foolish to dull their expression and obscure their personality with powder, rouge, and lipstick. But Elizabeth Vermont painted not to imitate nature, but to improve it. You did not question the means, but applauded the result. The flaunting boldness with which she used cosmetics increased rather than diminished the character of that perfect face. I suppose her hair was dyed. It was black and sleek and shiny. She held herself upright as though she had never learned to loll, and she was very slim. She wore a dress of black satin, the lines and simplicity of which were admirable, and about her neck was a long rope of pearls. I do love pearls too. Who doesn't love pearls? And diamonds, and rubies, and sapphires, and emeralds, and all the lovely things. One day I hope to learn how to make proper gold and silver or gold jewellery one day when I can afford the gold, set with diamonds and sapphires and emeralds and all sorts of lovely things. Why not? It's an ambition. It's a long way off because I'm only a self-taught silversmith, but it could happen. I'm thinking of buying some faceted sapphires for casting in place, and silver of course because that's all I can afford. Cast in place, casting and ring, make some lovely rings. Then I risk wrecking the sapphire, so there was that. I've got little tiny raw ones I can practice with. It didn't cost me a lot, so I might practice with them first. That's a project I could do later on. Make a wax ring for a model and then cast it in place. That's a good idea. Let's get back into my silversmithing because practice makes perfect, does it not? I don't need more jewellery though. I just make things just for the sheer joy and delight of making it, not out of any real necessity. So there is that. Anyway, right, where were we? Oh yes, a segue that, a rope of pearls. Her only other jewel was an enormous emerald which guarded her wedding ring, and its sombre fire emphasized the whiteness of her hand. But it was in her hands, with their reddened nails, that she most clearly betrayed her age. They had none of a girl's soft, dimpled roundness, and you could not but look at them with a certain dismay, including all the skin cancer scars. Oh, it's hideous, people of Earth, wrinkled and crepey. Oh, who's gonna love me now? Feckin' no one. But you know what? I'm okay. scars are better than actually dying of cancer, so it is what it is. Love me, love my scars. Right. Before very long, they would look like the talons of a bird of prey. Might not be such a bad thing after all. Take no prisoners, endure no sadomasochists, tolerate no BDSM, piss weak archetypes. Live your best life, am I right? Surrounded by people who are good and kind, and loyal and noble and decent and honouring. I'll stay alone in my little house with my little birdies. I can't tolerate the light today. Could you tell I couldn't tolerate the light? It's moderately better. Moderately. Right, where were we? Elizabeth Vermont was a remarkable woman of great birth, for she was the daughter of the 7th Duke of St. She married at the age of 18 to a very rich man. I'm just checking where you're at, Cooney. And started at once upon a career of astounding extravagance, lewdness, and dissipation. She was too proud to be cautious, too reckless to think of consequences, and within 2 years her husband, in circumstances of appalling scandal, divorced her. She married then one of the three, have to laugh at that. She married then one of the 3 co-respondents named in the case. 3, busy girl. And 18 months later ran away from him. Then followed a succession of lovers. She became notorious for her profligacy. Her startling beauty and her scandalous conduct held her in the public eye, and it was never very long but that she gave the gossips something to talk about. It's time I gave them something to talk about. Being punished when I didn't even have an affair with that man. It's utterly ridiculous, isn't it? If you're going to have an affair, have a fucking affair, people of Earth. I dislike affairs though. It's so tawdry, dishonourable, debased. I want a man who's in love with me, not me and every other. Vagine walking past. It's how it is though with men, isn't it? I'll have to get over myself. Stay alone in my little studio, in my little sacred space, muttering to myself about the ignominies of the male species. Yes, Kermie. Wait till you discover sex, Kermie. You'd be dangerous. You have to laugh. Anyway, where were we? Giving gossip something to talk about. Her name stank in the nostrils of decent people. She was a gambler, a spendthrift, and a wanton. But though unfaithful to her lovers, she was constant to her friends. And there always remained a few that would never allow, whatever she did, that she was anything but a very nice woman. She had candour, high spirits, and courage. Starting to like her. You can like someone for having candour, high spirits, and courage. Can you not? It's how I roll too. She was never a hypocrite. She was generous and sincere. It was at this period of her life that I came to know her. For great ladies, now that religion is out of fashion, when they are very much blown upon, take a flattering interest in the arts. When they receive the cold shoulder from members of their own class, they condescend sometimes to the society of writers, painters, and musicians. I like that. She's fallen out of favour with her own class, so she's hanging with the bohemian lot, as though we're somehow not quite worthy. Well, I beg to differ on that one. Artists are usually fine, upstanding people, except when they're led by their peni and their vagines, but you get that. Moving on. Moving right along, people. I found her an agreeable companion. She was one of those blessed persons who say quite fearlessly what they think, thus saving much useful time. She had a ready wit. She was always willing to talk with a diverting humour of her lurid past. Her conversation, although uninstructed, was good because, notwithstanding everything, she was an honest woman. Then she did a very surprising thing. At the age of 40, she married a boy of 21. Her friends said it was the maddest act of all her life, and some who had stuck to her through thick and thin, now for the boy's sake, because he was nice, and it seemed shameful thus to take advantage of his inexperience, refused to have anything more to do with her. It really was the limit. They prophesied disaster, for Elizabeth Vermont was incapable of sticking to any man for more than 6 months. Nay, they hoped for it, since it seemed the only chance for the wretched youth that his wife should behave so scandalously that he must leave her. They were all wrong. I do not know whether time was responsible for a change of heart in her, or whether Peter Vermont's innocence and simple love touched her, but the fact remains that she made him an admirable wife. She grew on a sudden so careful of her reputation that the tongue of scandal was silenced. His happiness seemed her only concern. No one could doubt that she loved him devotedly. After being the subject of so much conversation for so long, Elizabeth Vermont ceased to be talked about. It looked as though her story was told. She was a changed woman, and I amused myself with the notion that when she was a very old lady, with many years of perfect respectability behind her, the past, the lurid past, would seem to belong not to her, but to someone long since dead, whom once she had vaguely known. For women have an enviable faculty of forgetting. We do, We forgive and forget. Sometimes we never forgive, and sometimes we choose to forget. But I am the gatekeeper of memory. There's many things I don't forget that I may studiously ignore. We'll see. It's not the end of my story. People are there. Just saying. But who can tell what the fates have in store? Indeed, the fates, capricious and whimsical that they are. In the twinkling of an eye, all was changed. Peter Vermont, after 10 years of an ideal marriage, fell madly in love with a girl called Barbara Canton. She was a nice girl, the youngest daughter of Lord Robert Canton, who was at one time Under Secretary for Foreign Affairs. She was pretty in a fair and fluffy way. Of course, she was not for a moment to be compared with Lady Elizabeth. Many people knew what had happened, but no one could tell whether Elizabeth Vermont had any inkling of it, and they wondered how she would meet a situation which was so foreign to her experience. It was always she who had discarded her lovers. None had deserted her. For my part, I thought she would make short work of little Miss Canton. I knew her courage and her adroitness. All this was in my mind now while we chatted over our luncheon. There was nothing in her demeanour, as gay, charming, and frank as usual, to suggest that anything troubled her. She talked as she always talked, lightly but with good sense, and a lively perception of the ridiculous, of the various topics which the course of conversation brought forward. I enjoyed myself. I came to the conclusion that by some miracle she had no notion of Peter's changed feelings, and I explained this to myself by the supposition that her love for him was so great she could not conceive that his for her might be less. We drank our coffee and smoked a couple of cigarettes, and she asked me the time. 3:15. I must ask for my bill. Won't you let me stand you lunch? Of course, she smiled. Are you in a hurry? I'm meeting Peter at 3. Oh, how is he? He's very well. She gave a little smile, that tardy and delightful smile of hers, but I seemed to discern in it a certain mockery. For an instant she hesitated, and she looked at me with deliberation. You like curious situations, don't you? She said. You'd never guess the errand I'm bound on. I rang up Peter this morning and asked him to meet me at 3. I'm going to ask him to divorce me. You're not, I cried. I felt myself flush and did not know what to say. I thought you got on so well together. Do you think it's likely that I should know what all the world knows? I'm really not such a fool as all that. She was not a woman to whom it was possible to say what one did not believe, and I could not pretend that I did not know what she meant. I remained silent for a second or two. Why should you allow yourself to be divorced? Robert Canton is a stuffy old thing. I very much doubt if he'll let Barbara marry Peter if I divorced him. And for me, you know, it isn't of the smallest consequence, one divorce, more or less. She shrugged her pretty shoulders. How do you know he wants to marry her? He's head over ears in love with her. Has he told you so? No, he doesn't even know that I know. He's been so wretched, poor darling. He's been trying so hard not to hurt my feelings. Kookaburra is here. Kookaburra. I call him Kookaburra. I call him Mr. Cookie. Right, where were we? Perhaps it's only a momentary infatuation, I hazarded. It may pass. Why should it? Barbara's young and pretty. She's quite nice. They're very well suited to one another. And besides, what good would it do if it did pass? They love each other now, and the present in love is all that matters. I'm 19 years older than Peter. If a man stops loving a woman old enough to be his mother, do you think he'll ever come to love her again? You're a novelist. You must know more about human nature than that. Why should you make this sacrifice? When he asked me to marry him 10 years ago, I promised him that when he wanted his release, he should have it. You see, there was so great a disproportion between our ages. I thought that was only fair. And are you going to keep a promise that he hasn't asked you to keep? She gave a little flutter of those long, thin hands of hers, and now I felt that there was something ominous in the dark glitter of that emerald. Oh, I must, you know. One must behave like a gentleman. To tell you the truth, that's why I'm lunching here today. It was at this table that he proposed to me. We were dining together, you know, and I was sitting just where I am now. The nuisance is that I'm just as much in love with him now as I was then. She paused for a minute, and I could see that she clenched her teeth. Well, I suppose I ought to go. Peter hates one to keep him waiting. They're getting a divorce. I think he can fucking wait, don't you? She gave me a sort of little helpless look, and it struck me that she simply could not bring herself to rise from her chair. But she smiled and with an abrupt gesture sprang to her feet. Would you like me to come with you? As far as the hotel door, she smiled. We walked through the restaurant and the lounge, and when we came to the entrance, a porter swung round the revolving doors. I asked if she would like a taxi. No, I'd sooner walk. Such a lovely day. She gave me her hand. It's been so nice to see you. I shall go abroad tomorrow, but I expect to be in London all the autumn. Do ring me up. She smiled and nodded and turned away. I watched her walk up Davies Street. The air was still bland and spring-like, and above the roofs little white clouds were sailing leisurely in a blue sky. She held herself very erect, and the poise of her head was gallant. She was a slim and lovely figure, so that people looked at her as they passed. I saw her bow graciously to some acquaintance who raised his hat, and I thought that never in 1,000 years would it occur to him that she had a breaking heart. I repeat, she was a very honest woman. Blessed be. Right, the next story is a very long one. So, hopefully I can fit it into the 3 hours that this laptop runs videos for. And we'll see how we go. We've got people coming, hawkers coming. I'm going to ignore them. I'm occupied. Sign on my gate says no hawkers. Solemnly. Who's that looking at the street? Some young ladies with a beautiful caboodle. Right. Let us begin the next story, people of Earth. The Yellow Streak. The two prahus were dropping easily downstream, one a few yards ahead of the other. They're so entitled, aren't they, some people? It's obnoxious. You're not welcome, you're not welcome. Get the hint, Bridgets. That female creep that consorted with my friend. Oh, she's creepy as fuck. Puts her stuff right on top of my stuff to try and dominate me. Thinks she's something special. What? Because you attracted another dick. Sad little wench. But I'll let it go because at the end of the day, I had a lovely time dancing for her. For years. 14 years. Je ne regrette rien. Didn't just dance for him, you understand. I danced for my own purposes too. And we all had a lovely time. We all got along like peas and potatoes till that creature came along. Anyway. Makes you wonder what was really behind all that. It was all a bit odd, quite frankly. And I called myself an oddball, but yeah, there's odd. And then there's just obnoxious. Anyway, I don't need to wallow in other people's fecal matter and other people's ugliness and other people's faithlessness and dishonour and disrespect, not just for me, but for, their wives and their friends and their own selves. Yuck. Anyway, where were we? We'll start again. The two prahus were dropping easily downstream, one a few yards ahead of the other, and in the first sat the two white men. After 7 weeks on the rivers, they were glad to know that they would lodge that night in a civilized house. To Izat, who had been in Borneo since the war, the Dayak houses and their feast were of course an old story. But Campion, though new to the country, and at first amused by the strangeness, hankered too now for chairs to sit on and a bed to sleep in. The Dayaks were hospitable, but no one could say that there was much comfort to be found in their houses, and there was a monotony in the entertainment they offered a guest, which presently grew somewhat wearisome. Every evening, as the travellers reached the landing place, the head man, bearing a flag, and the more important members of the household came down to the river to fetch them. They were led up to the long house, a village really under one roof, built on piles, to which access was obtained by climbing up the trunk of a tree, rudely notched into steps. And to the beating of drums and gongs walked up and down the whole length of it in long procession. On both sides, serried throngs of brown people sat on their haunches and stared silently as the white men passed. Clean mats were unrolled and the guests seated themselves. The headman brought a live chicken and, holding it by the legs, waved it 3 times over their heads, called the spirits loudly to witness, and uttered an invocation. Then various persons brought eggs. Arak was drunk. A girl, a very small, shy thing, with the grace of a flower, but with something hieratic in her immobile face, held a cup to the white man's lips till it was empty, and then a great shout arose. The men began to dance, one after the other, each treading his little measure with his shield and his parang, to the accompaniment of drum and gong. After this had gone on for some time, the visitors were taken into one of the rooms that led off the long platform on which was led the common life of the household, and found their supper prepared for them. Just going to shut his cage because I want to pop out later and buy new swing for his outside cage. Yes? No, you're not going to sneak up on me. You get down there for a reason. Perfect timing because Mama's got things to do later. Get you a new swing, put you out in the sunshine, and what else are we going to do? We're going to clean your cages today because they're a bit, it's Friday, they're due, and they're a bit grotty. Yes. Cleanliness is next to birdliness. A lot of work looking after you guys, but you're worth it, you little bitey little bastard. You're a bitey little bastard, you're worth it. I love you. One day you'll like me. Maybe. Maybe. Right, where were we, people of Earth? The men began to dance, one after the other, each treading his little measure, with his shield and his parang, to the accompaniment of drum and gong. After this had gone on for some time, the visitors were taken into one of the rooms that led off the long platform, on which was led the common life of the household, and found their supper prepared for them. The girls fed them with Chinese spoons. Then everyone grew a little drunk, and they all talked till the early hours of the morning. But now their journey was done, and they were on their way to the coast. They had started at dawn. The river then was very shallow and ran clear and bright over a shingly bottom. The trees leaned over it so that above there was only a strip of blue sky, but now it had broadened out, and the men were poling no longer, but paddling. The trees, bamboos, wild sago like huge bunches of ostrich feathers, trees with enormous leaves, and trees with feathery foliage like the acacia, coconut trees, oh, you've got your corn, and areca palms, with their long, straight white stems. The trees on the banks were immensely and violently luxuriant. Here and there, gaunt and naked, was the bare skeleton of a tree struck by lightning or dead of old age, and its whiteness against all that green was vivid. Here and there, rival kings of the forest, tall trees soared above the common level of the jungle. Then there were the parasites. In the fork of two branches, great tufts of lush green leaves or flowering creepers that covered the spreading foliage like a bride's veil. Sometimes they wound round a tall trunk, a sheath of splendour, and threw long flowering arms from branch to branch. There was something thrilling in the passionate wildness of that eager growth. It had the daring abandon of the Maynard rioting in the train of the god. Kermit's doing some writing with his eye. Did you drop your corn, Kermit? You'll have to go and get it now. Yes. The day wore on, and now the heat was no longer so oppressive. Campion looked at the shabby silver watch on his wrist. It could not be long now before they reached their destination. What sort of chap is Hutchinson? He asked. I don't know him. I believe he's a very good sort. Hutchinson was the resident in whose house they were to spend the night, and they had sent on a Dyak in a canoe to announce their arrival. Well, I hope he's got some whisky. I've drunk enough arak to last me a lifetime. Campion was a mining engineer whom the Sultan on his way to England had met at Singapore, and finding him at a loose end had commissioned to go to Sambulu and see whether he could discover any mineral which might be profitably worked. He sent Willis, the resident at Kuala Solor, instructions to afford him every facility, and Willis had put him in the care of Izzat because Izzat spoke both Malay and Dyak like a native. This was the third trip they had made into the interior, and now Campion was to go home with his reports. They were to catch the Sultan Ahmed, which was due to pass the mouth of the river at dawn on the next day, but one, and with any luck they should reach Kuala Solor on the same afternoon. They were both glad to get back to it. There was tennis and golf there, and the club with its billiard tables, food which was relatively good, and the comforts of civilization. Izzat was glad too that he would have other society than Campion's. He gave him a sidelong glance. He was a little man with a big bald head, and though certainly 50, strong and wiry. He had quick, shining blue eyes and a stubbly grey moustache. He was seldom without an old briar pipe between his broken and discoloured teeth. He was neither clean nor neat. His khaki shorts were ragged and his singlet torn. He was wearing now a battered topee. He had knocked around the world since he was 18 and had been in South Africa, in China, and in Mexico. He was good company. He could tell a story well, and he was prepared to drink and drink again with anyone he met. They had got on very well together, but Izzat had never felt quite at home with him. Though they joked and laughed together, got drunk together, Izzat felt that there was no intimacy between them. For all the cordiality of their relations, they remained nothing but acquaintances. He was very sensitive to the impression he made on others, and behind Campion's joviality, he had felt a certain coolness. Those shining blue eyes had summed him up, and it vaguely irritated Izzat that Campion had formed an opinion of him, and he did not know quite what it was. He was exasperated by the possibility that this common little man did not think entirely well of him. He desired to be liked and admired. He wanted to be popular. He wished the people he met to take an inordinate fancy to him, so that he could either reject them or a trifle condescendingly bestow his friendship on them. His inclination was to be familiar with all and sundry, but he was held back by the fear of a rebuff. Sometimes he had been uneasily conscious that his effusiveness surprised the persons he lavished it on. By some chance, he had never met Hutchinson, though of course he knew all about him, just as Hutchinson knew all about him, and they would have many common friends to talk of. Hutchinson had been at Winchester, and Izzat was glad that he could tell him that he had been at Harrow. The prahu rounded a bend in the river, and suddenly, standing on a slight eminence, they saw the bungalow. In a few minutes they caught sight of the landing stage, and on it, among a little group of natives, a figure in white waving to them. Hutchinson was a tall, stout man with a red face. His appearance led you to expect that he was breezy and self-confident, so that it was not a little surprising to discover quickly that he was diffident and even a trifle shy. When he shook hands with his guests, Izzat introduced himself and then Campion, and led them up the pathway to the bungalow. Though he was plainly anxious to be civil, it was not hard to see that he found it difficult to make conversation. He took them out to the veranda, and here they found on the table glasses and whisky and soda. They made themselves comfortable in long chairs. Izzat, conscious of Hutchinson's slight embarrassment, with strangers expanded. He was very hearty and voluble, like our little Kermie right now. He began to speak of their common acquaintances at Kuala Solor, and he managed very soon to slip in casually the information that he had been at Harrow. You were at Winchester, weren't you? He asked. Yes. I wonder if you knew George Parker. He was in my regiment. He was at Winchester. I dare say he was younger than you. I love it when he swings on the swing. Sweet. You swinging, little Kermie? Are you swinging on the swing? Are you a little swinger? Izzat felt that it was a bond between them, that they had been at these particular schools, and it excluded Campion, who obviously had enjoyed no such advantage. They drank 2 or 3 whiskies. Izzat in half an hour began to call his host Hutchie. He talked a good deal about my regiment in which he had got his company during the war, and what good fellows his brother officers were. He mentioned 2 or 3 names which could hardly be unknown to Hutchinson. They were not the sort of people that Campion was likely to have come across, and he was not sorry to administer to him a neat snub when he claimed acquaintance with someone who spoke of. Billy Meadows. I knew a fellow called Billy Meadows in Sinaloa many years ago, said Campion. Oh, I shouldn't think it could be the same, said Izzat with a smile. Billy's by way of being a peer at the realm. He's the Lord Meadows who races. Don't you remember? He owned Spring Carrots. Dinner time was approaching, and after a wash and brush up, they drank a couple of gin pahits. They sat down. Hutchinson had not been to Kuala Solor for the best part of a year, and had not seen another white man for 3 months. He was anxious to make the most of his visitors. He could give them no wine, but there was plenty of whisky, and after dinner he brought out a precious bottle of Benedictine. They were very gay. They laughed and talked a great deal. Izzat was getting on famously. He thought he had never liked a fellow more than Hutchinson, and he pressed him to come down to Kuala Solor as soon as he could. They would have a wonderful Beano. Campion was left out of the conversation by Izzat with the faintly malicious intention of putting him in his place, and by Hutchinson through shyness, and presently, after yawning a good deal, he said he would go to bed. Hutchinson showed him to his room, and when he returned, Izzat said to him, You don't want to turn in yet, do you? Not on your life. Let's have another drink. They sat and talked. They both grew a little drunk. Presently Hutchinson told Izzat that he lived with a Malay girl and had a couple of children by her. He had told them to keep out of sight while Campion was there. I expect she's asleep now, said Hutchinson, with a glance at the door, which Izzat knew led into his room. But I'd like you to see the kiddies in the morning. Just then a faint wail was heard, and Hutchinson, with a "Hello, the little devil's awake," went to the door and opened it. In a moment or two he came out of the room with a child in his arms. A woman followed him. He's cutting his teeth, said Hutchinson. It makes him restless. The woman wore a sarong and a thin white jacket, and she was barefoot. She was young, with fine dark eyes, and she gave Izzat, when he spoke to her, a bright and pleasant smile. She sat down and lit a cigarette. She answered the civil questions Izzat put to her without embarrassment, but also without effusion. Hutchinson asked her if she would have a whisky and soda, but she refused. When the two men began to talk again in English, she sat on quite quietly, faintly rocking herself in her chair, and occupied with none could tell what calm thoughts. She's a very good girl, said Hutchinson. She looks after the house and she's no trouble. Of course, it's the only thing to do in a place like this. Did he marry a maid or did he marry a wife? One might wonder. This is the attitude, isn't it? Putrid. I shall never do it myself, said Izzat. After all, one may want to get married and then it means all sorts of botherations. But who wants to get married? What a life for a white woman. I wouldn't ask a white woman to live here for anything in the world. Of course it's a matter of taste. If I have any kiddies, I'm going to see that they have a white mother. Racist as well. Abhorrent, isn't it? Classist, racist, misogynist. And then they breed with sweet, young, innocent, docile women. Don't know any better. Who think they're upgrading, in her case with a white man in the colonies. The poor wretch. What a life. Dear goddess. Yes, my darling. That's not to say that some, I'm not being judgmental. My auntie Rachel was Samoan married to a Dutchman, but he treated her fairly badly too. Actually, they stayed married. I don't know why. I still remember him going to a dance, with Auntie Rachel with his wife, and my mother and Case. My mother came back from the dance, and the next day told me about it. She said, I think Uncle Herman, his name was Herman, I think Uncle Herman is going through some kind of midlife crisis. They were both in their 50s at the time. Oh, I said, what do you mean by that, Mum? Well, darling, we've been firm family friends for many, many years, since I worked on the trams with Auntie Rachel as a tram conductress, which was back in, the early 60s, late 50s, early 60s. I said, oh, really? Mum, I said, whatever do you mean? Well, my darling, it was most exciting, flattering, but also a bit awkward. Whatever do you mean? I said, Mum. What have you done? My mum was a flagrant femme fatale and had very little moral integrity, to put it delicately. She would not have been bothered at all, sleeping with a married man and all his mistresses. Wouldn't have bothered her at all. It wouldn't have fazed her. She would have said, well, I'm the one and I'm the perfect one. They can all just slough the fuck off. Well, anyway. Moral integrity. It's a bit boring. She used to say to my sister and I don't know how I raised two such boring women as you. You're so boring and decent and noble. It makes me want to be sick. We just look at her and blink a few times. There's something to be said about being noble and decent and having self-respect, though. It's a great comfort to one's old age, just saying. Not having to worry about syphilis and chlamydia and the seeping stench of your own ignominy. It's a great gift one gives to oneself. Anyway, sitting alone in my room. What use is sitting alone in your room? Come to the cabaret. Well, I've got no intention of being the most beautiful corpse that anyone's ever seen. Going to live my life to the best of my abilities. Sometimes I'll be out dancing, not giving a fuck about all the treacherous girls, because who are they anyway? Not in my class, people of Earth. What is my class? I don't know yet, but I'm setting myself apart from all that tawdriness. Can we all say together, ooh? Anyway, it's because of my mother and her putrescence that I'm like this, actually. Taught me well, who I don't want to exemplify. But anyway, she's telling me about Uncle Herman. Uncle Herman was quite a good-looking fella, you know. I remember him well, stirring my mother up, bantering about with her. This was back when I would come back from living in Melbourne for 3 years. So I was about 12 or 13. And I was looking at him then and looking at my Auntie Rachel, who was just so long-suffering, so sweet, such a good Mormon woman, so devout, a truly good woman. And I remember thinking, has my mother fucked Uncle Herman? Has he fucked my mother? Are they going to fuck? Have they thought about it? There was that kind of electricity in the air of flying middle-aged pheromones of the last hurrah of desperation that you get people in our age group. It's quite comical to watch sometimes. The flowering of the Middle Ages. It's not like you're going to procreate, but the spirit is willing, but the flesh is weak, you understand? Oh, you have to laugh. Anyway, she comes back from this dance, and she utterly blew my mind. This is how I discovered the calibre of woman that my mother was as regards her sexuality, although I already had a fairly good idea. It was just a bit odd and out of left field, though. And she says to me, Uncle Herman flirted with me outrageously last night. I said, what do you mean? Oh, she said, well, there was, I'll do it in her accent. Oh, well, there was your Auntie Rachel, who I deeply love and respect and adore. I'm looking and blinking a few times. I think she protested a little bit too much. Sitting at the table with Uncle Herman. Yes, I said. I must have been already married or in my early 20s, so I was kind of onto it. Yes, I said. What happened then? Well, Uncle Herman took me by great surprise. I've had quite a shock. Quite a shock, I said. Okay, what happened? What did you do, Mother? Oh, me? I did nothing, Renal darling. All I had to do was show up. This is true, though. My mother oozed such sexuality and sensuality that verily all she really had to do was show up. It sort of happened to me late in life, manifested, you know, that I don't know how it happened, actually, probably one of my near deaths, my angels wanting me to get real about life and have a balanced view and put out. Well, I did have a window period there when I was putting out occasionally. But anyway, 10 years of celibacy now just makes it all seem a bit funny now, but oh well. I just saw a little red car. I thought it was my daughter coming to see me. Isn't that pathetic? 10 years of celibacy and almost 2 years of estrangement and looking for little red cars. Anyway, I try not to cry on that one. We pull it together, tiny Aries. You've been abandoned by your fellow species. For what? For living your best life and keeping your moral integrity. So, fuck it all, people of Earth. Anyway, where was I? Oh yeah, so my mother was saying to me, I went to this wonderful dance with your Uncle Case and Uncle Herman and Auntie Rachel last night. And I don't know what came over Uncle Herman, she said. I was very, very quite shocked. I said, what happened, Mother? They're like, you know how he likes to drink. I said, yes, he's very fond of the drink. She says, well, I think he must have been a tiny bit under the weather. Under the weather? Oh, I had to laugh. What did you do, Mother? I swear on the Bible, nothing. I did nothing. Okay. I'm there, she says, dancing because I love to dance. You know, it's a very German thing. I probably got it from her too. We love to dance, we crowds. Dancers, we dance to our own immolation sometimes. Like the red shoes, am I right? Hans Christian Andersen, although he was Danish, I believe. But anyway, I digress. So, she says, Uncle Herman asks me to dance with him. And I said, sure, okay. I love to dance, and it's Uncle Herman, who I've known for at least 20, 30 years. Okay, Mum. So she says, he danced with me so wildly and passionately and twirled me around and drew me into his arms and flung me out and pulled me back like I was a fucking ragdoll, Tanya. Yes, Mummy. Yes. Well, it's just a dance. Bit of fun. It's harmless, isn't it? No, darling. Harmless it was not. Whatever do you mean, Mummy? Well, she said, at the end of the dance, Uncle Herman looked deep into my eyes, smiled and said, Gisela, Gisela, you are the most exciting woman I have ever known in my entire life. I said, known in the biblical sense? Of God, Mitch, of God, Mitch, how can you say such a thing? And then she flushed from toes to the tip of her head, and I just looked at her. You did not, Mummy. Tell me you did not. Of course not. Auntie Rachel was sitting at the table watching us dance. Of course I did not. I just looked at her, and she looked at me. Can you imagine, my darling, she said to me, the most exciting woman he's ever known in his whole life? And smiled. Mummy, you're incorrigible. Yes, I know, darling, but it really was just a dance, and I'm not going there because, you know, I have Uncle Case, and he has Auntie Rachel, and we're just friends. Good, Mummy. Remember that. Remember that. Anyway, For some reason, I never forgot that. The thought of my Uncle Herman telling my mother she was the most exciting woman he'd ever known. It probably was true, to be fair. My mother was extremely exciting when she got going. But it really was just a dance. And so we'll carry on with that. And he used to be really quite awful. He used to tease her Mercer, "You bloody German," he'd say to her. "We won the war." And she'd just nod. Only because of the Russian winter, you understand? And it would go, they would parry back and forth like this. And it was a kind of a sexual bantering, or how do you put it? There was always a kind of an element of electricity between them. And I would look at my Auntie Rachel and she would just nod and smile with the patience of a woman who knows what she's dealing with. Oh, she was lovely, my Auntie Rachel. Really lovely. A wonderful woman. Anyway. Right, we were at the part where he said, "Of course it's a matter of taste. If I had any kiddies, I'm going to see that they have a white mother." Hutchinson looked down at the little dark-skinned child he held in his arms. He gave a faint smile. "It's funny how you get to like them," he said. "When they're your own, it doesn't seem to matter that they've got a touch of the tar brush." It's just appalling, isn't it? Appalling. You must remember it's a story written in a time when people were just ugly. The woman gave, and by people I mean white people, who can still remain equally as ugly. The woman gave the child a look, and getting up said she would take it to bed. It, like it's an animal. I should think we'd better all turn in," said Hutchinson. "God knows what the time is." Izzat went to his room and threw open the shutters, which his boy Hassan, whom he was travelling with, had closed. Blowing out the candle so that it should not attract the mosquitoes, he sat down at the window and looked at the soft night. The whisky he had drunk made him feel very wide awake, and he was not inclined to go to bed. He took off his ducks, put on his sarong, and lit a cheroot. His good humour was gone. It was the sight of Hutchinson looking fondly at the half-caste child which had upset him. "They've got no right to have them," he said to himself. "They've got no chance in the world, ever." He passed his hands reflectively along his bare and hairy legs. He shuddered a little. Though he had done everything he could to develop the calves, his legs were like broomsticks. He hated them. He was uneasily unconscious of them all the time. They were like a native's. Of course they were the very legs for a top boot, In his uniform he had looked very well. He was a tall, powerful man, over 6 feet high, and he had a neat black moustache and neat black hair. His dark eyes were fine and mobile. He was a good-looking fellow, and he knew it. And he dressed well, shabbily when shabbiness was good form, and smartly when the occasion demanded. He had loved the army, and it was a bitter blow to him when, at the end of the war, he could not remain in it. His ambitions were simple. He wanted to have 2,000 a year, give smart little dinners, go to parties, and wear a uniform. He hankered after London. Of course his mother lived there, and his mother cramped his style. He wondered how on earth he could produce her if ever he got engaged to the girl of good family. Do not have a message from my gov, that'll be a scammer. Creepy as fuck, scammers. Abhorrent. Anyway, where were we? He wondered how on earth he could produce her if ever he got engaged to the girl of good family with a little money, whom he was looking for to make his wife. Because his father had been dead so long and during the later part of his career was stationed in the most remote of the Malay states, Izzat felt fairly sure that no one in Sembulu knew anything about her, but he lived in terror lest someone, running across her in London, should write over to tell people that she was a half-caste. She had been a beautiful creature when Izzat's father, an engineer in the government service, had married her, but now she was a fat old woman with grey hair who sat about all day smoking cigarettes. Izzat was 12 years old when his father died, and then he could speak Malay much more fluently than English. An aunt offered to pay for his education, and Mrs. Izzat accompanied her son to England. She lived habitually in furnished apartments, and her rooms with their oriental draperies and Malay silver were overheated and stuffy. She was forever in trouble with her landladies because she would leave cigarette ends about. Izzat hated the way she made friends with them. She would be shockingly familiar with them for a time, then there would be a falling out, and after a violent scene she would flounce out of the house. Her only amusement was the pictures, and to these she went every day in the week. At home she wore an old and tawdry dressing gown, but when she went out she dressed herself. But, oh how untidily! In extravagant colours, so that it was a mortification to her dapper son. But how my mother dressed in the 80s. Bless. Not untidily, but extravagantly florid. He quarrelled with her frequently. She made him impatient, and he was ashamed of her. And yet he felt for her a deep tenderness. It was almost a physical bond between them, something stronger than the ordinary, oh no, I can't do that, than the ordinary feeling of mother and son, so that, notwithstanding the failings that exasperated him, she was the only person in the world with whom he felt entirely at home. It was owing to his father's position and his own knowledge of Malay, for his mother always spoke it to him, that after the war, finding himself with nothing to do, he had managed to enter the service of the Sultan of Samburu. He had been a success. He played games well. He was strong and a good athlete. In the rest house at Kuala Solor were the cups which he had won at Harrow for running and jumping, and to these he had added since others for golf and tennis. With his abundant fund of small talk, he was an asset at parties, and his cheeriness made things go. He ought to have been happy, and he was wretched. He wanted so much to be popular, and he had an impression, stronger than ever at this moment, that popularity escaped him. He wondered whether, by any chance, the men at Kuala Solor, with whom he was so hail fellow well met, suspected that he had native blood in him. He knew very well what to expect if they ever found out. They wouldn't say he was gay and friendly then. They would say he was damned familiar. And they would say he was inefficient and careless, as the half-castes were. And when he talked of marrying a white woman, they would snigger. Oh, it was so unfair. What difference could it make, that drop of native blood in his veins? And yet, because of it, they would always be on the watch for the expected failure at the critical moment. Everyone knew that you couldn't rely on Eurasians. Sooner or later they would let you down. He knew it too, but now he asked himself whether they didn't fail because failure was expected of them. They were never given a chance, poor devils. But a cock crew loudly. It must be very late, and he was beginning to feel chilly. He got into bed. When Hassan brought him his tea next morning, he had a racking headache, and when he went into breakfast, he could not look at the porridge and the bacon and eggs which were set before him. Hutchinson, too, was feeling none too well. Hello, Kermie. Are you laughing? Yes. I fancy we made rather a night of it, said his host, with a smile to conceal his faint embarrassment. I feel like hell, said Izzat. I'm going to breakfast off a whisky and soda myself, added Hutchinson. Izzat asked for nothing better, and it was with distaste that they watched Campion eat with healthy appetite a substantial meal. Campion chaffed them. By God, Izzat, you're looking green about the gills. You're looking green too, Kermie, but it's because you truly are green. A green birdie? A little green bird? Are you a happy boy? Threatening the little bow. Little bow sits so quietly, all beaten down by fate. We need to spark you up, Bo. We need to put on some music and dance. Spark up the broken ones. Breathe life into us again. At least for another day or another night. In the space-time continuum, never letting the bastards grind us down. You understand? Some of you do. Some of you just think I'm a bit pathetic and desperate, seeking the company of other humans. Can feel a bit like desperation sometimes. I'm trying to decide if I go out tonight. It's cold. I'll see when it comes closer to the hour. I've never seen such a filthy colour. Izzat flushed. The swarthiness was always a sensitive point with her, but he forced himself to give a cheery laugh. You see, I had a Spanish grandmother, he answered, at the risk of sounding racist, which I am not. People always blame it on the Spanish. And when I'm under the weather, it always comes out. I remember at Harrow, I fought a boy and licked him because he called me a damned half-caste. He's well in the closet, isn't he? Living some kind of lie. It's an awful way to live. Awful. Just be who you are. Love your people, your tribe, the blood that pours through your veins. Be proud of who you are, people of Earth. You are dark, said Hutchinson. Do Malays ever ask you if you have any native blood in you? Yes. Damn their impudence. The boat with their kit had started early in the morning in order to get to the mouth of the river before them and tell the skipper of the Sultan Ahmed, if by chance he arrived before he was due, that they were on their way. Campion and Izzat were to set out immediately after tiffin in order to arrive at the place where they were to spend a night before the bore passed. A bore is a tidal wave that, by reason of a peculiarity in the lie of the land, surges up certain rivers, and there happened to be one on the river on which they were travelling. Hutchinson had talked to them of it the night before, and Campion, who had never seen such a thing, was very much interested. This is one of the best in Borneo. It's worth looking at, said Hutchinson. He told them how the natives, waiting the moment, rode it and were borne up the river on its crest at a breathless and terrifying speed. He had done it once himself. Never no more for me, he said. I was scared out of my wits. I should like to try it once, said Izzat. It's exciting enough, but my word, when you're in a flimsy dugout and you know that if the native doesn't get the right moment, you'll be flung in that seething torrent and you won't have a chance in a million. No, it's not my idea of sport. I've shot a good many rapids in my day, said Campion. Rapids be damned. You wait till you see the bore. It's one of the most terrifying things I know. Do you know that at least a dozen natives are drowned in it in this river alone every year? They lounged about on the veranda most of the morning, and Hutchinson showed them the courthouse. The gin paheets were served. They drank 2 or 3. Izzat began to feel himself. Let me just change the tone of that. It came out wrong. Izzat began to feel himself. And when at length tiffin was ready, he found that he had an excellent appetite. I bet he did after all that feeling himself. Oh, never mind. Stop it, Tanya Aarons. Stop it right now. You're meant to be a lady, you know. By the gods. Right, where were we? Hutchinson had boasted of his Malay curry, and when the steaming, succulent dishes were placed before them, they all set to ravenously. Hutchinson pressed them to drink. You've got nothing to do but sleep. Why shouldn't you get drunk? He could not bear to let them go so soon. It was good after so long to have white men to talk to, and he lingered over the meal. He urged them to eat. They must have a filthy meal that night at the Longhouse, and nothing to drink. They would have a filthy meal that night at the Longhouse, and nothing to drink but arrack. They had better make hay while the sun shone. Campion suggested once or twice that they should start, but Hutchinson and Izzard too, for now he was feeling very happy and comfortable, assured him there was plenty of time. Hutchinson sent for his precious bottle of Benedictine. They had made a hole in it last night. They might as well finish it before they went. When at last he walked down with them to the river, they were all very merry, and none of them was quite steady on his legs. Over the middle of the boat was an attap awning, and under this Hutchinson had had a mattress laid. The crew were prisoners who had been marched down from the jail to row the white men, and they wore dingy sarongs with the prison mark. They waited at their oars. Izzard and Campion shook hands with Hutchinson and threw themselves down on the mattress. The boat pushed off. The turbid river, wide and placid, glistened in the heat of that brilliant afternoon like polished brass. In the distance, ahead of them, they could see the bank with its tangle of green trees. They felt drowsy, but Izzard at least found a curious enjoyment in resisting for a little while the heaviness that was creeping over him, and he made up his mind that he would not let himself fall asleep till he had finished his cheroot. At last the stub began to burn his fingers, and he flung it into the river. "I'm going to have a wonderful snooze," he said. "What about the bore?" asked Campion. "Oh, that's all right. We needn't worry about that." He gave a long and noisy yawn. His limbs felt like lead. He had one moment in which he was unconscious. My eyes are very sensitive lately. I wonder what that's about. He had one moment in which he was conscious of his delicious drowsiness, and then he knew nothing more. Suddenly he was awakened by Campion shaking him. "I say, what's that?" "What's what?" He spoke irritably, for sleep was still heavy upon him, but with his eyes he followed Campion's gesture. He could hear nothing, but a good way off he saw 2 or 3 white-crested waves following one another. They did not look very alarming. "Oh, I suppose that's the bore." "What are we going to do about it?" cried Campion. Izzard was scarcely yet quite awake. He smiled at the concern in Campion's voice. "Don't worry, these fellows know all about it. They know exactly what to do. We may get a bit splashed." But while they were saying these few words, the bore came nearer, very quickly, with a roar like the roar of an angry sea, and Izzard saw that the waves were much higher than he had thought. He did not like the look of them, and he tightened his belt so that his shorts should slip down if the boat were upset. In a moment the waves were upon them. It was a great wall of water that seemed to tower over them, and it might have been 10 or 12 feet high, but you could measure it only with your horror. It was quite plain that no boat could weather it. The first wave dashed over them, drenching them all, half filling the boat with water. And then, immediately, another wave struck them. The boatmen began to shout. They pulled madly at their oars, and the steersman yelled an order, but in that surging torrent they were helpless, and it was frightening to see how soon they lost all control of the boat. The force of the water turned it broadside on, and it was carried along, helter-skelter, upon the crest of the Bore. Another great wave dashed over them, and the boat began to sink. Iseult and Campion scrambled out of the covered place in which they had been lying. Suddenly the boat gave way under their feet, and they found themselves struggling in the water. It surged and stormed around them. Iseult's first impulse was to swim for the shore, but his boy Hassan shouted to him to cling to the boat. For a minute or two they all did this. "Are you all right?" Campion shouted to him. "Yes, enjoying the bath," said Iseult. He imagined that the waves would pass by as the Bore ascended the river, and in a few minutes at the outside they would find themselves in calm water once more. He forgot that they were being carried along on its crest. The waves dashed over them. They clung to the gunwale and the base of the structure which supported the up awning. Then a larger wave caught the boat as it turned over, falling upon them so that they lost their hold. There seemed nothing but a slippery bottom to cling to, and Iseult's hands slithered helplessly on the greasy surface. But the boat continued to turn, and he made a desperate grab at the gunwale, only to feel it slip out of his hands as the turn went on. Then he caught the framework of the awning, and still it turned slowly right round, and once more he sought for a handhold on the bottom. The boat went round and round with a horrible regularity. He thought this must be because everyone was clinging to one side of it. He tried to make the crew go round to the other. He could not make them understand. Everyone was shouting, and the waves beat against them with a dull and angry roar. Every time the boat rolled over on them, Iseult was pushed underwater, only to come up again as the gunwale and the framework of the awning gave him something to cling to. The struggle was awful. Presently he began to get terribly out of breath, and he felt his strength leaving him. He knew that he could not hold on much longer, but he did not feel frightened, for his fatigue by now was so great that he did not very much care what happened. Hassan was by his side, and he told him he was growing very tired. He thought the best thing was to make a dash for the shore. It did not look more than 60 yards away, but Hassan begged him not to. Still they were carried along amid those seething, pounding waves. The boat went around and around. Just want to see what I'm looking for.
Eating.
The boat went round and round, and they scrambled over it like squirrels in a cage. Izzat swallowed a lot of water. He felt he was very nearly done. Hassan could not help him, but it was a comfort that he was there, for Izzat knew that his boy, used to water all of his life, was a powerful swimmer. Then Izzat did not know why. For a minute or two the boat held bottom downwards, so that he was able to hold on to the gunwale. It was a precious thing to be able to get his breath. At that moment, two dugouts with Malays in them riding the Bore passed swiftly by them. They shouted for help, but the Malays averted their faces and went on. They saw the white men and did not want to be concerned in any trouble that might befall them. It was agonizing to see them go past, callous and indifferent in their safety. Well, it's human nature, isn't it? But on a sudden, the boat rolled round again, round and round slowly, and the miserable, exhausting scramble repeated itself. It took the heart out of you. But the short respite had helped Izzat, and he was able to struggle a little longer. Then, once more, he found himself so terribly out of breath that he thought his chest would burst. His strength was all gone, and he did not know now whether he had enough to try to swim for the shore. Suddenly he heard a cry. "Izzat! Izzat! Help! Help!" It was Campion's voice. It was a scream of agony. It sent a shock all through Izzat's nerves. Campion! Campion! What did he care for Campion? Fear seized him, a blind, animal fear, and it gave him a new strength. He did not answer. "Help me! Quick! Quick!" he said to Hassan. Hassan understood him at once. By a miracle, one of the oars was floating quite close to them, and he pushed it into Izzat's reach. He placed a hand under Izzat's arm, and they struck away from the boat. Izzat's head was pounding and his breath came with difficulty. He felt horribly weak. The waves beat in his face. The bank looked dreadfully far away. He did not think he could ever reach it. Suddenly the boy cried that he could touch bottom, and Izzat put down his legs, but he could feel nothing. He swam a few more exhausted strokes, his eyes fixed on the bank, and then, trying again, felt his feet sink into thick mud. He was thankful. He floundered on, and there was the bank within reach of his hands. Black mud in which he sank to his knees. He scrambled up, desperate to get out of the cruel water. And when he came to the top, he found a little flat with tall, rank grass all about it. He and Hassan sank down on it and lay for a while, stretched out like dead men. They were so tired that they could not move. They were covered with black mud from head to foot. But presently Izzat's mind began to work, and a pang of anguish on a sudden shook him. Campion was drowned. It was awful. He did not know how he was going to explain the disaster when he got back to Kuala Solor. They would blame him for it. He ought to have remembered the bora and told the steersman to make for the bank and tie up the boat when he saw it coming. It wasn't his fault, it was the steersman's. He knew the river. Why in God's name hadn't he had the sense to get into safety? Why indeed? Curious minds might want to know about that one. Perhaps their constant pernicious racism. How could he have expected that it was possible to ride that horrible torrent? Izzat's limbs shook as he remembered the wall of seething water that rushed down upon them. He must get the body and take it back to Kuala Solor. He wondered whether any of the crew were drowned too. He felt too weak to move, but Hassan now rose and wrung the water out of his sarong. He looked over the river and quickly turned to Izzat. Tuan, a boat is coming. The lalang grass prevented Izzat from seeing anything. Shout to them, he said. Hassan slipped out of view and made his way along the branch of a tree that overhung the water. He cried out and waved. Presently Izzat heard voices. There was a rapid conversation between the boy and the occupants of the boat, and then the boy came back. They saw us capsize, Tuan, he said, and they came as soon as the bore passed. There's a longhouse on the other side. If you will cross the river, they will give us sarongs and food, and we can sleep there. Izzat for a moment felt that he could not again trust himself on the face of the treacherous water. What about the other Tuan? He asked. They do not know. If he's drowned, they must find the body. Another boat has gone upstream. Izzat did not know what to do. He was numb. Hassan put his arm round his shoulder and raised him to his feet. He made his way through the thick grass to the edge of the water, and there he saw a dugout with 2 Dayaks in it. The river now once more was calm and sluggish. The great wave had passed on, and no one would have dreamed that so short a while before the placid surface was like a stormy sea. The Dayaks repeated to him what they had already told the boy. Izzat could not bring himself to speak. He felt that if he said a word, he would burst out crying. Hassan helped him to get in, and the Dayaks began to pull across. He fearfully wanted something to smoke, but his cigarettes and his matches, both in a hip pocket, were soaking. The passage of the river seemed endless. The night fell, and when they reached the bank, the first stars were shining. He stepped ashore, and one of the Dayaks took him up to the longhouse. But Hassan seized the paddle he had dropped, and with the others pushed out into the stream. 2 or 3 men and some children came down to meet Izzat, and he climbed to the house amid a babble of conversation. He went up the ladder and was led with greetings and excited comment to the space where the young men slept. Rattan mats were hurriedly laid to make him a couch, and he sank down on them. Someone brought him a jar of arak, and he took a long drink. It was rough and fiery, burning his throat, but it warmed his heart. He slipped off his shirt and trousers and put on a dry sarong which someone lent him. By chance he caught sight of the yellow new moon lying on her back, and it gave him a keen, almost sensual pleasure. He could not help thinking that he might at that moment be a corpse floating up the river with the tide. The moon had never looked to him more lovely. He began to feel hungry and he asked for rice. One of the women went into a room to prepare it. He was more himself now, and he began to think again of the explanations he would make at Kuala Solor. No one could really blame him because he had gone to sleep. He certainly wasn't drunk. Hutchinson would bear him out there, and how was he to suspect that the steersman would be such a damned fool? It was such rotten luck, but he couldn't think of Campion without a shudder. At last a platter of rice was brought him, and he was just about to start eating when a man ran hurriedly along and came up to him. "The Tuan's come," he cried. "What Tuan?" He jumped up. There was a commotion about the doorway, and he stepped forward. Hassan was quickly coming towards him out of the darkness, and then he heard a voice. "Izzat, are you there?" Campion advanced towards him. "Well, here we are again. By God, that was a pretty near thing, wasn't it? You seem to have made yourself nice and comfortable. My heavens, I could do with a drink." His dank clothes clung round him. He was muddy and dishevelled, but he was in excellent spirits. "I didn't know where the hell they were bringing me. I'd made up my mind that I should have to spend the night on the bank. I thought you were drowned." "Here's some arak," said Izzat. Campion put his mouth to the jar and drank and spluttered and drank again. "Muck, but by God it's strong." He looked at Izzat with a grin of his broken and discoloured teeth. "I say, old man, you look as though you'll be all the better for a wash." "I'll wash later." "All right, so will I. Tell them to get me a sarong. How did you get out?" He did not wait for an answer. "I thought I was done for. I owe my life to these two sportsmen here." He indicated with a cheery nod two of the Dyak prisoners, whom Izzat vaguely recognised as having been part of their crew. "They were hanging on to that blasted boat on each side of me, and somehow they cottoned on to it that I was down and out. I couldn't have lasted another minute. They made signs to me that we could risk having a shot at getting to the bank, but I didn't think I had the strength. By George, I've never been so blown in all my life. I don't know how they managed it, but somehow they got hold of the mattress we'd been lying on, and they made it into a roll. They're sportsmen, they are. I don't know why they didn't just save themselves without bothering about me. They gave it me. I thought it a damned poor lifebelt, but I saw the force of the proverb about a drowning man clutching at a straw. I caught hold of the damned thing, and between them, somehow or other, they dragged me ashore." The danger from which he had escaped made Campion excited and voluble, but Izzat hardly listened to what he had said. He heard once more, as distinctly as though the words rang now through the air, Campion's agonised cry for help, and he felt sick with terror. The blind panic raced down his nerves. Campion was talking still, but was he talking to conceal his thoughts? Izzat looked into those bright blue eyes and sought to read the sense behind the flow of words. Was there a hard glint in them, or something of cynical mockery? Did he know that Izzat, leaving him to his fate, had cut and run? He flushed deeply. After all, what was there that he could have done? At such a moment it was each for himself, and the devil take the hindmost. But what would they say in Kuala Solor if Campion told them that Izzat had deserted him? He ought to have stayed. He wished now with all his heart that he had. But then, it was stronger than himself. He couldn't. Could anyone blame him? No one who had seen that fierce and seething torrent. Oh, the water and the exhaustion, so that he could have cried. If you're as hungry as I am, you'd better have a tuck in at this rice, he said. Campion ate voraciously, but when Izzat had taken a mouthful or two, he found that he had no appetite. Campion talked and talked. Izzat listened suspiciously. He felt that he must be alert, and he drank more arak. He began to feel a little drunk. I shall get into the devil of a row at KS, he said tentatively. I don't know why. I was told off to look after you. They won't think it was very clever of me to let you get nearly drowned. It wasn't your fault. It's so cold in here. Do you know I've actually got the heater on very low and it's still bloody cold in here. My legs are quite cold. We have to crank the steam up, won't we, my boys? Mama T does not do it. Cold. Oh, sweet little darlings, my angels, my babies, my birdies, my sweet little honey pies, my sugar pies, my fluffy bums all fluffed up because they're cold too. It's ridiculous how cold it is today. 15 degrees Celsius. It's so sunny out too. You'd think it would be a bit warmer. It's ridiculous, people of Earth. We're in the 4th of July. It is winter. Calm your farm, Tanya Aarons. Calm your farm. Right, where were we? Sorry about that. I just suddenly had to throw a little whirling dervish tantrum about being cold. So bloody fortunate and privileged am I that I have a lovely home to live in, a lovely garden, the luxury to read lovely stories, and a heater. Ask me about the electricity bill later. Sod it. Right, where were we? I woke up yesterday morning. I think I told you in my video yesterday. And I said to my cleaning lady, Rati, who had newly arrived, I think I need a husband. It was the way I said it, all pathetic and weak and soft. I was barely synapsing, I'd just woken up. She looked at me. Really, Tanya? Really? Then we both threw our heads back and laughed and laughed and laughed and laughed. And then I said, perhaps I might actually need a husband, but not someone else's husband. You understand? Oh, you have to laugh. The whole thing was just an ignominy and a putrescence. But I did love that man. I did. Sweetness. Never mind. Life goes on, people are there. Life goes on. Right, where were we? Here we are. It wasn't your fault. It was the fault of the damned fool of a stairsman. After all, the important thing is that we're saved. By George, I thought I was finished once. I shouted out to you. I don't know if you heard me. No, I didn't hear anything. There was such a devil of a row, wasn't there? It's a lie. You did hear him. Wow. Covering one's tuchuses of things, and that people are there. It's amazing how people will cover their own asses when you're caught out. Naughty, naughty, very naughty. The truth always comes out, mamas. Always. I don't think he was that silly, that's why he mentioned it. He knew he'd left him to fucking drown. Perhaps you'd got away before. I don't know exactly when you did get away. Izzat looked at him sharply. Was it his fancy that there was an odd look in Campion's eyes? I've been left for dead so many times. So many times by other humans. Not just left for dead, but actively throttled as well. I despise most of you. Do you know that? I despise you. But when I love you, it's a supreme gift from the gods. Many of you were not worthy of a scrap of my love. It was a tryst and a trust from a warrior goddess, a woman who survived the worst befoulment that can happen to a child. When she loves so foolishly and blindingly, with such passion, devotion and sweetness. So your cruelty is astonishing, insurmountable, and unforgivable. It is what it is, people of Earth. But in time, I'll heal, I'll get over it, and I'll laugh while I watch you drown in your own treachery. It'll be delightful. I'll have schadenfreude. Schadenfreude is a thing, people of Earth. Sometimes a wonderful gift too. Wait long enough, you get to enjoy it. I've got spirits who are Christians in the background. Forgive, forgive, forgive. He knew not what he did. Oh, he knew very well what he was doing. Very, very well. Studied me on the internet for years. Which buttons to push. Go to hell. The Manatee should be out dancing tonight. Just to remind you who you thought you were fucking with, motherfuckers. It is what it is. Right. There was such an awful confusion, he said. I was just about down and out. My boy threw me over an oar. He gave me to understand you were all right. He told me you'd got ashore. The oar. He ought to have given Campion the oar and told Hassan, the strong swimmer, to give him his help. Was it his fancy again that Campion gave him a quick and searching glance? Getting hungry. How many pages are left, my beautiful ones, my sweet ones, the ones who love me, you know, philosophically, if not for real, you understand? I wish I could have been of more use to you, said Izzat. Oh, I'm sure you had enough to do to look after yourself, answered Campion. The head man brought them cups of arak, and they both drank a great deal. Izzat's head began to spin, and he suggested that they should turn in. Beds had been prepared for them, and mosquito nets fixed. They were to set out at dawn on the rest of their journey down the river. Campion's bed was next to his, and in a few minutes he heard him snoring. He had fallen asleep the moment he lay down. The young men of the longhouse and the prisoners of the boat's crew went on talking late into the night. Izzat's head now was aching horribly, and he could not think. When Hassan roused him as day broke, it seemed to him that he had not slept at all. Their clothes had been washed and dried, but they were bedraggled objects as they walked along the narrow pathway to the river where the prahu was waiting for them. They rowed leisurely. The morning was lovely, and the great stretch of placid water gleamed in the early light. By George, it's fine to be alive, said Campion. He was grubby and unshaved. He took long breaths, and his twisted mouth was half open with a grin. You could tell that he found the air singularly good to breathe. He was delighted with the blue sky and the sunshine and the greenness of the trees. Izzat hated him. He was sure that this morning there was a difference in his manner. He did not know what to do. He had a mind to throw himself on his mercy. He had behaved like a cad, but he was sorry. He would give anything to have the chance again, but anyone might have done what he did, and if Campion gave him away, he was ruined. He could never stay in Sumbulu. His name would be mud in Borneo and the Strait settlements. If he made his confession to Campion, he would surely get Campion to promise to hold his tongue. But would he keep his promise? He looked at him, a shifty little man. How could he be relied on? Izzat thought of what he had said the night before. It wasn't the truth, of course, but who could know that? At all events, who could prove that he hadn't honestly thought that Campion was safe? Whatever Campion said, it was only his word against Izzat's. He could laugh and shrug his shoulders and say that Campion had lost his head and didn't know what he was talking about. Besides, it wasn't certain that Campion hadn't accepted his story. In that frightful struggle for life, he could be very sure of nothing. He had a temptation to go back to the subject, But he was afraid if he did that, he would excite suspicion in Campion's mind. He must hold his tongue. That was his only chance of safety. And when they got to KS, he would get in his story first. We should be completely happy now, said Campion, if I only had something to smoke. We shall be able to get some stinkers on board. Campion gave a little laugh. Human beings are very unreasonable, he said. At the first moment I was so glad to be alive that I thought of nothing else, but now I'm beginning to regret the loss of my notes and my photographs and my shaving tackle. Izzat formulated the thought which had lurked at the back of his mind, but which all through the night he had refused to admit into his consciousness. I wish to God he'd been drowned, then I'd have been safe. There she is, cried Campion suddenly. Izzat looked round. They were at the mouth of the river, and there was the Sultan Ahmed waiting for them. Izzat's heart sank. He had forgotten that she had an English skipper and that he would have to be told the story of their adventure. What would Campion say? The skipper was called Breeden, and Izzat had met him often at Kuala Solor. He was a little bluff man with a black moustache and a breezy manner. Hurry up, he called out to them as they rowed up. I've been waiting for you since dawn. But when they climbed on board, his face fell. Hello, what's the matter with you? Give us a drink, and you shall hear all about it, said Campion, with his crooked grin. Come along. They sat down under the awning on a table with glasses, a bottle of whiskey and soda water. The skipper gave an order, and in a few minutes they were noisily underway. We were caught in Nabore, said Izzat. He felt he must say something. His mouth was horribly dry, notwithstanding the drink. Were you, by Jove? You're lucky not to have drowned. What happened? He addressed himself to Izzat because he knew him, but it was Campion who answered. He related the whole incident accurately, and Izzat listened with strained attention. Campion spoke in the plural when he told the early part of the story, and then, as he came to the moment when they were thrown into the water, changed to the singular. At first it was that they was what they had done, and now it was what happened to him. He left Izzat out of it. Izzat did not know whether to be relieved or alarmed. Why did he not mention him? Was it because in that mortal struggle for life he had thought of nothing but himself? Or did he know? And what happened to you? Said Captain Breeden, turning to Izzat. Izzat was about to answer when Campion spoke. Until I got over to the other side of the river, I thought he was drowned. I don't know how he got out. I expect he hardly knows himself. It was touch and go, said Izzat with a laugh. Why had Campion said that? He caught his eye. He was sure now that there was a gleam of amusement in it. It was awful not to be certain. He was frightened. He was ashamed. He wondered if he could not so guide the conversation, either now or later, as to ask Campion whether that was the story he was going to tell in Kuala Solor. There was nothing in it to excite anyone's suspicions. But if nobody else knew, Campion knew. He could have killed him. "Well, I think you're both of you damned lucky to be alive," said the skipper. It was but a short run to Kuala Solor, and as they steamed up the Sumbulu River, Izzat moodily watched the banks. On each side were the mangroves and the nipas washed by the water, and behind the dense green of the jungle, here and there among fruit trees, were Malay houses on piles. Night fell as they docked. Goring, of the police, came on board and shook hands with them. He was living at the rest house just then, and as he set about his work of seeing the native passengers, he told them they would find another man, Porter by name, staying there too. They would all meet at dinner. The boys took charge of their kit, and Campion and Izzat strolled along. They bathed and changed. At 8:30, the four of them assembled in the common room for gin pahits. "I say, what's this Breeden tells me about your being nearly drowned?" said Goring as he came in. Izzat felt himself flush, but before he could answer, Campion broke in, and it seemed certain to Izzat that he spoke in order to give the story as he chose. He felt hot with shame. Not a word was spoken in disparagement of him. Not a word was said of him at all. He wondered if those two men who listened, Goring and Porter, thought it strange that he should be left out. He looked at Campion intently as he proceeded with his narration. He told it rather humorously. He did not disguise the danger in which they had been in, but he made a joke of it, so that the two listeners laughed at the quandary in which they found themselves. "A thing that's tickled me since," said Campion, "is that when I got over to the other bank, I was black with mud from head to foot. I felt I really ought to jump in the river and have a wash, but I felt I'd been in that damned river as much as ever I wanted, and I said to myself, 'No, by George, I'll go dirty.' And when I got into the long house and saw Izzat as black as I was, I knew he'd felt just like I did." They laughed, and Izzat forced himself to laugh too. He noticed that Campion had told the story in precisely the same words he had used when he told it to the skipper of the Sultan Ahmed. There could be only one explanation of that. He knew everything, and had made up his mind exactly what story to tell. The ingenuity with which Campion gave the facts and yet left out what must be to Izzat's discredit was devilish. But why was he holding his hand? It wasn't in him not to feel contempt and resentment for the man who had callously deserted him in that moment of a dreadful peril. Suddenly, in a flash of inspiration, Izzat understood. He was keeping the truth to tell to Willis, the resident. Izzard had gooseflesh as he thought of confronting Willis. He could deny, but what would his denials serve him? Willis was no fool, and he would get at Hassan. Hassan could not be trusted to be silent. Hassan would give him away. Then he would be done for. Willis would suggest that he had better go home. He had a racking headache, and after dinner he went to his room, for he wanted to be alone so that he could devise a plan of action. And then a thought came to him that made him go hot and cold. He knew that the secret which he had guarded so long was a secret to nobody. He was on a sudden certain of it. Why should he have those bright eyes and that swarthy skin? Why should he speak Malay with such ease and have learned Dayak so quickly? Of course they knew. What a fool he was ever to think that they believed that story of his about the Spanish grandmother. They must have laughed up their sleeves when he told it, and behind his back they had called him a damned nigger. And now another thought came to him, torturing, and he asked himself whether it was an account of that wretched drop of native blood in him that when he heard Campion cry out his nerve failed him. After all, anyone might at that moment have been seized with panic, and why in God's name should he sacrifice his life to save a man's whom he cared nothing for? Because it's a human duty, as a human being, it's a mark of honour. Oh well, I'm not normal people there. I'm an oddball. It was insane. But of course in KS they would say it was only what they expected. They would make no allowances. At last he went to bed, but when, after tossing about recklessly for God knows how long, he fell asleep, he was awakened by a fearful dream. He seemed to be once more in that raging torrent, with the boat turning, and then there was the desperate clutching at the white gunwale, and the agony as it slipped out of his hands, and the water that roared over him. He was wide awake before dawn. His only chance was to see Willis and get his story in first, and he thought over carefully what he was going to say and chose the very words he meant to use. He got up early and in order not to see Campion went out without breakfast. He walked along the high road till such time as he knew the resident would be in his office, and then walked back again. He sent in his name and was ushered into Willis's room. He was a little elderly. Sorry, I've lost my spot. He was a little elderly man with thin grey hair and a long yellow face. I'm glad to see you back, safe and sound, he said, shaking hands with Izzard. What's this I hear about your being nearly drowned? Izzard in clean ducks, his topee spotless, was a fine figure of a man. His black hair was neatly brushed, and his moustache was trimmed. He had an upright and soldierly bearing. I thought I'd better come and tell you at once, sir, as you told me to look after Campion. Fire away. Izzat told his story. He made light of the danger. He gave Willis to understand that it had not been very great. They would never have been upset if they had not started so late. I tried to get Campion away earlier, but he'd had 2 or 3 drinks, and the fact is, he didn't want to move. Was he tight? I don't know about that, smiled Izzat good-humouredly. I shouldn't say he was cold sober. He went on with his story. He managed to insinuate that Campion had lost his head a little. Of course, it was a very frightening business to a man who wasn't a decent swimmer. He, Izzat, had been more concerned for Campion than for himself. He knew the only chance was to keep cool, and the moment they were upset, he saw that Campion had got the wind up. You can't blame him for that, said the resident. Of course, I did everything I possibly could for him, sir, but the fact is there wasn't anything much I could do. Well, the great thing is that you both escaped. It would have been very awkward for all of us if he'd been drowned. I thought I'd better come and tell you the facts before you saw Campion, sir. I fancy he's inclined to talk rather wildly about it. There's no use exaggerating. On the whole, your stories agree pretty well, said Willis, with a little smile. Izzat looked at him blankly. Haven't you seen Campion this morning? I heard from Goring there'd been some trouble, and I looked in last night on my way home from the fort after dinner. You'd already gone to bed. Izzat felt himself trembling, and he made a great effort to preserve his composure. By the way, you got away first, didn't you? I don't really know, sir. You see, there was a lot of confusion. You must have if you got over to the other side before he did. I suppose I did then. Well, thanks for coming to tell me, said Willis, rising from his chair. As he did so, he knocked some books on the floor. They fell with a sudden thud. The unexpected sound made Izzat start violently, and he gave a gasp. The resident looked at him quickly. I say, your nerves are in a pretty state. Izzat could not control his trembling. I'm very sorry, sir, he murmured. I expect it's been a shock. You'd better take it easy for a few days. Why don't you get the doctor to give you something? I didn't sleep very well last night. The resident nodded, as though he understood. Izzat left the room, and as he passed out, some man he knew stopped and congratulated him on his escape. They all knew of it. He walked back to the rest house, and as he walked, he repeated to himself the story he had told the resident. Was it really the same story that Campion had told?
Little fortune from the swing. You're swinging, my little sweet boy. My little chicky boy. My little pointy.
And little bows crunching on his cuttlefish. Sorry, where were we? Was it really the same story that Campion had told? He had never suspected that the resident had already heard it from Campion. What a fool he had been to go to bed. He should never have let Campion out of his sight. Why had the resident listened without telling him that he already knew? Now Izzard cursed himself for having suggested that Campion was drunk and had lost his head. He had said this in order to discredit him, but he knew now that it was a stupid thing to do. And why had Willis said that about his having got away first? Perhaps he was holding his hand too. Perhaps he was going to make inquiries. Willis was very shrewd. But what exactly had Campion said? He must know that, at whatever cost he must know. Izzard's mind was seething, so that he felt he could hardly keep a hold on his thoughts. But he must keep calm. He felt like a hunted animal. He did not believe that Willis liked him. Once or twice in the office, he had blamed him because he was careless. Perhaps he was just waiting till he got all the facts. Izzard was almost hysterical. He entered the rest house, and there, sitting on a long chair with his legs stretched out, was Campion. He was reading the papers which had arrived during their absence in the jungle. Izzard felt a blind rush of hatred well up in him as he looked at the little shabby man who held him in the hollow of his hand. "Hello," said Campion, looking up. "Where have you been?" To Izzard it seemed that there was in his eyes a mocking irony. He clenched his hands and his breath came fast. "What have you been saying to Willis about me?" he asked abruptly. The tone in which he put the unexpected question was so harsh that Campion gave him a glance of faint surprise. "I don't think I've been saying anything very much about you. Why? He came here last night." Izzard looked at him intently. His brows were drawn together in an angry frown as he tried to read Campion's thoughts. "I told him you'd gone to bed with a headache. He wanted to know about our mishap. I've just seen him." Izzard walked up and down the large and shaded room. Now, though it was still early, the sun was hot and dazzling. He felt himself in a net. He was blind with rage. He could have seized Campion by the throat and strangled him, and yet, because he did not know what he had to fight against, he felt himself powerless. He was tired and ill, and his nerves were shaken. On a sudden, the anger which had given him a sort of strength left him, and he was filled with despondency. It was as though water and not blood ran through his veins. His heart sank, and his knees seemed to give way. He felt that, if he did not care, he would begin to cry. He was dreadfully sorry for himself. "Damn you! I wish to God I'd never set eyes on you," he cried pitifully. "What on earth's the matter?" asked Campion, with astonishment. "Oh, don't pretend. We've been pretending for 2 days, and I'm fed up with it." His voice rose shrilly. It sounded odd in that robust and powerful man. "I'm fed up with it. I cut and run, I left you to drown. I know I behaved like a skunk. I couldn't help it. Campion rose slowly from his chair. What are you talking about? His tone was so genuinely surprised that it gave Izzard a start. A cold shiver ran down his spine. When you called for help, I was panic-stricken. I just caught hold of an oar and got Hassan to help me get away. That was the most sensible thing you could do. I couldn't help you. There wasn't a thing I could do. Of course not. It was damn silly of me to shout. It was a waste of breath, and breath was the very thing I wanted. Do you mean to say you didn't know? When those fellows got me the mattress, I thought you were still clinging to the boat. I had an idea that I got away before you did. Izzard put both his hands to his head and gave a hoarse cry of despair. My God, what a fool I've been! The two men stood for a while, staring at one another. The silence seemed endless. What are you going to do now? Asked Izzard at last. Oh, my dear fellow, don't worry. I've been frightened too often myself to blame anyone who shows the white feather. I'm not going to tell a soul. Yes, but you know. I promise you, you can trust me. Besides, my job's done here, and I'm going home. I want to catch the next boat to Singapore. There was a pause, and Campion looked for a while, reflectively, at Izzard. There's only one thing I'd like to ask you. I've made a good many friends here, and there are one or two things I'm a little sensitive about. When you tell the story of our upset, I should be grateful if you shouldn't make out that I had behaved badly. I wouldn't like the few fellows here to think that I'd lost my nerve. Izzard flushed darkly. He remembered what he had said to the resident. It almost looked as though Campion had been listening over his shoulder. He cleared his throat. I don't know why you think I should do that. Campion chuckled good-naturedly, and his blue eyes were gay with amusement. The yellow streak, he replied, and then, with a grin that showed his broken and discoloured teeth, have a cheroot, dear boy. The yellow streak. In the post-COVIDian madness, the yellow streak. There's a lot I could say about that, but I think I'll just stop with the amusement and the satisfaction of knowing what calibre of man wanted me to get myself injected with a bioweapon, hoping that I too would die along with those that lacked discernment and courage and basic human decency. You must understand. A kiss is just a kiss, a case of do or die. Bye for now. Have a wonderful afternoon, people of Earth. It's 12:30 p.m. on the 4th of July, 2025. Independence Day. Something worth fighting for. Women of Eastros. And men of honour and integrity, courage and real love. Fight for the women you love. Amen. Priscilla.